Last year, in June of 2023, Mark, a student at Cambridge University, UK, obtained an average score of over 90% in his exams. To put this in context, this phenomenal result places Mark in the top 0.1% of students here in Cambridge, a university that's like already chock full with some of the smartest people in the world. How is this possible, you might ask yourself? He must be a genius, that's how. One of those people who just by looking at a book is able to absorb all the information within. That's never going to be me. I'm Alex, a researcher at Cambridge University where I've been teaching for the past 7 years, and I'm here to tell you that you're wrong. Very, very wrong. In fact, what I've learned is that Mark's study methods are not only surprisingly simple, they're actually extremely accessible to anyone, even mere mortal non-geniuses like us. And you only need 3 items: a pencil, a notebook, and a life-size body pillowcase of Light Yagami from Death Note. So before going over Mark's learning hacks, it's important to understand why they work. What problem are they addressing? Because without properly understanding why, just copying what Mark did likely won't pay off for you, and you'll end up feeling frustrated and disappointed in the whole thing. So let's start by having a look at what the typical student does. The typical student goes to their lectures, listens to their professors, and then reads whatever study material is available to them. Throughout this process, the big problem is that as a student, you end up being bombarded with information, which is going to be really bad for 2 reasons. One, most obviously, our brains aren't really designed to commit so much information all at once into our long-term memory. In fact, according to the latest research, we are surprisingly bad at moving information from our working memory to our long-term memory where we want it to be. How many of the Reddit posts that you browsed yesterday can you remember? What did you have for dinner last weekend? By default, our brain tends to assume that most of the information that we're exposed to is useless and therefore tosses it away in response. So what we want to do is to make an active effort in separating the diamonds from the dirt. We need to let our brain know, hey, this might be relevant. Let's keep this information in stock for later. So that's the first major problem when it comes to information overload. The second problem is that constantly being exposed to so much information can lead to what is known as the illusion of competency. This idea that we fully understand how something works, when in reality we have just a very superficial grasp of the whole thing. And this is something that I notice all the freaking time with my students. They're able to very easily repeat the basic beats of everything that they've been taught, but when you ask them to go deeper, to explain why something works the way it does, they're all but lost, despite initially being so sure of themselves. When you follow along with a lecture, great professors make the information seem easy. As you're reading, the material seems obvious. If you look at a solved problem, the steps look like no-brainers. It's easy to trick yourself into thinking that you understand more than you do. This is what is known as the illusion of competency, and it tricks students into thinking they know more than they do, and can even trick them into thinking that they've aced tests they've bombed in reality. You can recognize the bias before it's too late, however. You can avoid this trap. If you guys remember from the beginning of the video, I mentioned that if you're going to study properly, if you're going to be able to commit whatever it is you're learning to your long-term memory, you're going to need 3 items. Here's an important caveat, however. You only need these 3 items. Anything else from your laptop to your smartphone, food items, and even other books should be put away when you want to start studying. Because trust me, the last thing you want to do is to engage in multitasking. Multitasking is going to be poison for your brain. Switching between tasks, going back and forth between different slides and different lectures will all but drown your focus and instantly break your brain's ability to make new, meaningful, long-lasting connections in the information that it's currently processing. And this right here actually constitutes Mark's first tip, which is to reduce the noise in your study environment to the essential minimum. And in this, pristine, clean environment, you're going to be ready for Mark's second tip. Nothing lazy about this, by the way. Everything that you wish to commit to long-term memory, write it down by hand, pencil on paper. Don't type, don't text. Instead, using your own words, carefully go over the study material by jotting it down. And yes, at first, this is no doubt going to feel a bit tedious and frustrating because it's so slow, particularly in today's society of instant gratification, right? Where we expect to kind of see the rewards immediately after putting in the effort. This takes a bit of time. It takes a bit of time for you to actually jot things down. But according to Mark, it feeling a bit uncomfortable is actually a sign that it's working. Forming new connections, moving information from our working memory to our long-term memory is literally like a workout for our brain. It's meant to feel tough in the moment. You're going to feel some amount of pain, but you'll feel so bloody good later on when you're done with the whole thing. Pen, paper, get to it. Which brings me to my final point. In one of the most famous papers in the history of psychology titled The Magical Number 7 ± 2, Some Limits to Our Capacity for Processing Information. In this paper, the author, George Miller, talks about how we're only able to store 5 to 9 pieces of information in our working memory at a time. Way fewer, in fact, than what most people assume. Moreover, our working memory is very ephemeral, for lack of a better word, with information being stored there for about 10 to 15 seconds, if that. This is why immediately after reading something off a slide, you're able to recite it quite well and you feel that you've learned it, right? You feel that you understand what you just read, but then like 10 minutes later, you can barely remember what the whole thing was about. So what's the best way to circumvent this? What's the best way to actually have this long-term information be committed to our long-term memory despite our brain not really being that good at this whole thing? Well, this is precisely where our buddy Kira is going to come into play. And I'm going to be honest with you, I chose this whole body pillow Death Note stuff mostly for shock and entertainment value. It doesn't have to be a body pillow. It can be a toy, a household object, or perhaps the best case scenario, another person, someone you can talk to. Because what you want to do here to commit information to long-term memory is to essentially become a professor and then explain whatever it is you're trying to learn to this other person. And I know what you're thinking. Me interact with other people? And yes, I agree, it's a tough proposition. But this right here is actually Mark's most important secret. This is what allowed him to outshine everyone else at Cambridge. Because when you're explaining something, when you're trying to make the other person understand whatever it is you're talking about, you literally have no choice but to understand it yourself. Otherwise, not only would you not be able to properly articulate what you're talking about to this other person, you would also become the laughingstock of the town. And do you want that?